Good morning, everyone. I'm from the Lean Institute Africa, in South Africa, and I'm in Johannesburg, and I'm here with our presenter, Ben Osias. He's in Cape Town. So I'm just going to introduce Ben, and then we'll start. Ben is a Lean coach with the Lean Institute Africa. He is based in Cape Town, often hailed as the most beautiful city in the world. Originally from Kentucky, USA, so Ben began his career at Toyota Kentucky, and he has spent the past decade working with internationally to support organizations in their continuous improvement journeys. With a strong background in operations, supply chain, and finance, Ben gets the most fulfillment in helping companies build systems that prioritize and cultivate people's development. His work reflects a commitment to fostering environments where individuals and teams thrive. Welcome and thanks. We'll hand over to you, Ben.
Thank you, Seppo, and great to work with you both here today and outside with the Lean Institute. Welcome to everybody else with the Lean Global Connection. I'm just commenting at the top here, it's such an awesome event that we were able to do this on a regular basis, and big thank you to the team that's putting it on. I know it's a significant amount of work that requires going into it. So thank you again, and glad that you're here. Definitely want to open the floor up for questions, so I encourage you as we're going through, whether the Q&A or the chat, the features there in your Zoom panel. Would love to hear from you. It makes it much more engaging as well when you're going through the content. So I know we've got a 30-minute time slot here. We'll be very crisp and sharp with the content. Want to leave a little bit of time at the end for some questions and discussion, but we'll get right into it now. As you notice too, at the theme, fostering a culture and systems of people development, it can sound a bit heady at times, and I think hopefully the goal of today is how can we have some practical insight of how we can build these types of systems, very practical, straightforward systems that can support us in our journey as leaders to help our people with their thinking and their improvements. Okay, so just a bit of a roadmap of where we're heading. We'll talk about, again, a bit more specific around our role as leaders. We'll look at a system and maybe a high-level definition of that. And then we'll talk about how to manage those systems, improve those, and then develop the system itself and the people within it. So first and foremost, as Seppo mentioned in the intro, I was very privileged to begin my journey at Toyota Kentucky. It is their largest facility globally, wholly owned, I should say, and they're in Kentucky, Georgetown, several thousand people, several thousand automobiles coming off the line each day. So quite inspiring. I started there when in my early 20s, and I think at the time, I didn't necessarily appreciate all that I was being put within and part of. And I definitely wanted to do my best job, but I didn't necessarily know all of the deep thinking that was going on behind the scenes. One thing I do remember very starkly was coming in each day and you have a massive banner that welcomed you that said, "Good thinking, good products." And I saw that. And then during the course of my travels overseas internationally and going to Japan a couple of times to see Toyota there, you also see it in the kanji and the way they originally intended. Good products come from good thinking. And that to me is really what stands out about the Toyota production system, but likewise about our role as leaders is that, yes, we have the responsibility and the charge as leaders to create good products and make sure those are commercialized in an effective and efficient manner. But first and foremost, we need to develop our people. And if we cannot develop our people, then we're going to have a very difficult time doing the things that we'd like to do from a profitability, sustainability standpoint. So hopefully that sets the tone, and that's where I'd like us to be thinking with that lens of how do we do this people development that sometimes can be put on the back burner given the day-to-day urgencies and priorities, but let's think about how we can be having that in a virtuous cycle. So I encourage you as well, there's a great reference, Toyota Way 2001. This is also the genesis, I would say, of Jeffrey Liker's great book, The Toyota Way, and his recently published edition. So there are some awesome anecdotes and stories within this, if you've had the chance to kind of read through that original version. But some of the key values there, I would say, challenge Kaizen in this just Japanese term, Genchi Genbutsu, go to the source, go to see, put your boots on. These are in the vein, again, I think, from the business and the organization doing well and us being efficient and effective. But I think what we've all realized over time is that you cannot do these sustainably, those top three, without also building in those other pillars of respect for people, the respect piece and the teamwork piece, the ability to work with others productively, to collaborate, engage, identify, and solve problems. And this was something that Toyota put to their entire global workforce in the year 2001 to help align and bring back some clarity of what they were doing with their value system. And I would argue that we also need to do that for ourselves at times, both individually and widely, if necessary, to clarify that intentionality. So let's get into the systems a bit, and kind of like this diagram at a high level, just to show hopefully what paints a picture of most of our operating environments. We represent companies that have a front-end sales function or marketing function, R&D, develop some products, bring those products to market, commercialize those, move them through some sort of product or service operation in order to deliver that and change the fit, form, or function, add value to it, and deliver that to our customers. We've got to procure in raw materials and hold an appropriate level of stock for those. We've got to do supplier development. We've got to do a financial piece on top of that with credit and looking at invoicing and all the rest, people systems, likewise, payroll, benefits. So we all have these multitudes of problems that we need to solve within our systems, as we can appreciate. But I do like to say, too, that we need to always look at those in a light of there's always room for improvement, or I would at least say 99.9% of the time, there's room for improvement. Maybe that 0.1% is when you need to take a little bit of a break. But the goal is that we're looking at the systems that we work within as ever-evolving, ever-changing mechanisms that we as leaders have the responsibility for the effectiveness of. And that's our job, is to be able to step back and take a broader view, see the system for what it is, see where it's strong, see where it's weaker, and then paint the right picture for ourselves, whether it's a benchmark to go out and get a new perspective of seeing what other systems are capable of, or doing some internal comparison or reference or assessment. The goal is to always be clear, what is today's current state that we can be moving forward and bringing the team along with us productively on that journey. So to get in a bit more, some of the ways I've appreciated looking at a system as well, and this is in the lexicon of Six Sigma and Lean. So SIPOC and looking at suppliers' inputs, taking that internally to our operation with our processes and our steps, and then how do we have our outputs leading to the customer. And you can also link that with the order to cash value stream and the procure to pay value stream. So those are two key foundational process flows that also are built within our day-to-day ERP systems likewise. So thinking about it in that vein. Also from a value stream mapping standpoint, I think there's a tremendous amount of overlap with the way the SIPOC thinks about it and the way that we can look at those maps to our suppliers, the functions, and the swim lanes, and then also the customers ultimately getting all of our processes to line up to that. And then something that I think we don't necessarily speak about as much, or at least for myself personally, I didn't link it initially, is around systems thinking and looking at some of the best practice, the overview of how this can tie in with the way that systems can be mature or function most effectively and have those feedback loops and be able to adapt and improve. And I think when I look at it from a high level, you think it's all very consistent in the vein of we need to set up the system, plan, and then operate within it, check and adjust. And that's that PDA cycle that I think overlays on top of each of these ways of looking at it. So the purpose of this slide too is I would say if you are not clear on the system that you work within as a leader, I think it is your responsibility for yourself to do some exercise in this vein that helps clarify it. And it could be large scale. You can have multiple teams, cross-functional, bring an external coach in to help you do it. Or you can simply have a piece of paper or an Excel sheet and do that for yourself to know what system am I working within, and can I start mapping some of these inputs and outputs that help me understand how things flow. So another way that I've learned how to think about it over the years as well, and by no means perfect, but it's at least helped me, I think, shrink the universe in some worlds that I've operated within. And to the point, first, design or define the system and being able to understand for yourself, what is the map here? And what are all the variables at play and all the stakeholders and all the process flows that we need to be aware of? Then I think it's a sanity check to say, this system, what is it capable of? And if it's capable of delivering a widget, how many widgets per hour or per day do we think it can get? What's the machine telling us from a rating standpoint it can get? Where do we have bottlenecks that's limiting the capacity of the overall system? And being very aware of that. So that's your first line in the sand of that's our theoretical max. And if we can understand that as a leader, then we're aware of, okay, what's a really good day or a really good week look like? And that can start to inform how do we manage the system. Managing the system, I think in the vein of plan versus actual, that is the single most powerful tool, I would argue, that can start problem solving, because it gives you a current state. Where are we now? It gives you an ideal state. Where do we want to be or need to be? And then with those, if you can quantify them, you've got a gap, you've got a problem to solve. So I think having a scoreboard that says for today, How many units out the door? How many reports to deliver? How many emails to put out the door? How many minutes do I want to spend developing my team members' plan? And then at the end of the day, what's my actual? And no shame in the actual, but it's how do we learn from that actual, begin to inform that problem solving piece. We'll speak a bit more to something that I would say is a foundational piece as well. It's called Hinkatin, Japanese term for change point. And it's the way that we can think about managing the system. Once we set the plan and start to learn from the actual, how do we understand what drives change and variability within it so that we can do perhaps a better job of forecasting, looking ahead to get ahead of it. So then let's get into the problem solving piece a bit, and then we'll touch on the detail. The goal of this, as I said, plan versus actual, single most powerful tool. But then on top of that, the thinking that comes with it is the problem solving piece. Once I have that gap and that problem to solve, what do we need to do with it? Obviously, our role as a leader is to say, I can't just sweep it under the rug. I need to look at that problem as a positive thing, something I want to go after and work with my team to take care of. So how do we do that? First, we got to be aware of the problems. There are many of the lean tools. The goal of the lean tools is to make problems visible. And then the point is too, with us solving problems, not everything we can do today. Some require longer term thinking, a longer term initiative or project, a deeper dive at A3 if that's your lexicon as well. And so I think the point is, let's drive action. This action item list, it can be very basic, literally a whiteboard and a pen, who, what, when, Excel sheet, Microsoft tool, or whatever tool. I don't want to call out specific, but to the point, it can be whatever format you need to drive action effectively within your team. And with that action, how do we learn from it? Are the things that we're doing as a result of our problem solving actually moving us in a direction operationally that we're working to get to? And then also the underlying element here, developing the team. And we want to be doing this along the entire journey. It's not something ad hoc that we stop and say, okay, great, let's let the dust settle. And now let's go think about how we did and collaborate. We want to do that, but we also want to be doing that in real time with our team members and having them be able to develop their thinking of identifying, solving problems, and helping manage the system as well. And keeping that respect as we go through it. I think oftentimes, I know me as an American growing up, it's you want to get things done. That's in our nature. I know that we share that a lot around the globe, but how do you do that in a way that builds up others, encourages others, helps them strive for something greater versus breaks them down or diminishes them or cracks the whip or whatever analogy we like. Okay, so just in the vein of some of the boards, and maybe think about this. I was going to throw in some photos, but I didn't want to confuse it. That's on the next slide. So the way I like when going into a new environment, and maybe my first check is for your system of how you manage the day-to-day for your team members on the floor. And that's where the value is created oftentimes, whether the manufacturing floor or the operating floor or the office environment. To the point, do we have a scoreboard? Do we have some way of our team understanding, are we doing well today? Or are we doing well this week or whatever time frame? And traditionally, there are some pillars that we would say you could use: safety, quality, service, cost, people. Those are a nice starting point. You can build those out to include other elements should you like. I think oftentimes we get focused on service. Again, how many units out the door, how many products delivered, how many invoices sent, whatever. Those are our key metrics we know from a business profitability and sustainability standpoint, but also layering in that additional thinking around, are we keeping people safe? Are we delivering high quality? Are we doing it at an effective cost? And are we, again, developing our people? So that answers the question, how are we doing? How are we performing? With that, we're going to have some problems, or at least some things that tell us, hey, we're off track in certain ways. Then the point is, how do we start looking at the change points? And let's, again, get to that momentarily. But I like using a fishbone diagram, man, material, method, machine. And that helps break it down and start to paint the picture of our map for how we want to go about the problem-solving journey. Hinkatin also uses the same framework in order to do that. So momentarily, we'll touch on that. The point with this side, and I like it being on a whiteboard, and it does not even need to have any tape or structure to it. It can be free form. Let's look at our scoreboard, and then during a team huddle or at the end of the day, let's map out and say, where are we having these issues? What's causing us? We had 20 minutes of downtime on line one. Hey, what caused that? Oh, we didn't have material that came in today. Okay, well, let's put that on the board on the fishbone for material. Or the machine had a breakdown. Okay, let's put that there and let's put a star next to it to come back around and understand what caused it. So that's the point, is that at least gives us a map based on the scoreboard of what things are happening, what's causing it. Also, then the goal is here, and this is where you need to be careful, because this is where, as leaders, we pride ourselves on us getting action done. We want to have a list, and we want our team to be working on it, and we want to be seeing things get ticked off. But the goal here is that you don't just jump to action. You do need, I would say, to go through this step of first mapping it out having that initial problem solving so that you know the actions that you're doing aren't just going off and fighting fires or containing it, putting band-aids. You can do that choicefully, but the point is we want to be aware of how that fits in and also be able to circle back and do the deeper problem solving to keep it from coming back, obviously. Then I think there is a goal, and I touched on this briefly, but whether at the end of a day or I think ideally at the end of a week with your team, you do a plus delta. And it's a very simple exercise on the whiteboard. Hey, what went well this week? Where were we really strong? We had good output on 3 of our lines. 1 line really struggled. So let's put that into things to improve for next week. What can we do better there? Oh, some of our shift members weren't on time. What can we do there to support them? So it's around that. Let's just have some open dialogue. Anything goes for our team. But to be able to clear the air, I think it's really nice before the weekend starts to give them the opportunity to vocalize where they're coming from and be able to put that onto the board. And then you as a leader have some time to think over the weekend when you do your thinking and be able to say for the next week, how can we start doing things that address some of those systemic problems perhaps that are coming up. So that answers the question, what are we learning along the way? And I think that is probably one of the more valuable pieces of this whole equation is first, we want to know how the system is doing, but what are we learning from the system again, so that we can be supporting the improvement of it. I put this down here because oftentimes you get asked the question, I think we've all been part of the discussion of, does it need to be whiteboards and pen and paper or my scoreboards? Do I have to have them printed out and people write on it, or can I do it digitally? And I would say I'm not a black and white person. You can do it depending on your environment. If your team members are remote, then obviously digital is probably helpful because it can bring more people in and have more consistency. There is power of the pen to have it up in real time in your environment if you can do that. So some blend. I think you need to have your discretion as a leader to say what supports these questions. Are we answering these questions at the bottom here? And whatever format does that, perfect. Okay, so maybe a little bit to overwhelm you and hopefully inspire you. But this is around some of the systems that we've seen worked with in the past, and really just some examples. And I want to just tell you, all the format can be completely different. There is no single perfect way to have this type of system. But I think what I say on the next slide here is that these systems don't need to be perfect, but they do need to be present. And that is your role as a leader to say, if you do not have some version of problem solving or some version of what we had on that previous page, a scoreboard, a first line problem solving, an action item list, and some reflection mechanism, then your job is to make that present. And again, let's not be afraid to begin and continue that learning journey, but let's make that our responsibility that we're going to support our team members to have that type of system in place. I'm looking at the time and you realize, geez, 30 minutes fly. So let's keep moving through here. HINCA 10, I encourage you, maybe the message here, because there's much more that can be said, is to do some deeper research. I had not realized the real power of this until a trip earlier this year. I was very fortunate to go to Japan and do some benchmarking, and you saw it in every environment. And it had been several years since I was there with COVID and everything, but to come back and see it in most worlds and look at it, they were using it, the fishbone, literally, man, material, method, machine, whatever sequence or order, items to be checked before a change point occurs or some way to get the team thinking, hey, what's going on today? Even down to the point we would see on their HINCA 10 board under the manpower, there are a group of visitors coming in today. We need to be aware of them in our operating environment. That's awesome. It tells your team what's different about today that you need to be aware of and understand could cause a change and cause variation in the work that we're doing. So just a great way to look out that initial risk management type process. So definitely encourage you. There's much more to be said, but recommend doing some research on HINCA 10. Okay, also something to research, and I feel like I put some of this in here because without it, the system is not as functional, not as holistic. So Art Smalley has a great book here, 4 Types of Problems, and really respect the work that he's done with this. But it also helps you have a lens as a leader when you're going out and identifying problems on the floor. What type of problem are we engaging ourselves in? Because oftentimes we get stuck, myself included, in this troubleshooting, this reactive firefighting, problem-solving mode where we're not able to maintain our standard and we need to be fighting to get back up to it. And it feels great when we get back to it, but oftentimes we slide back. It's our day-to-day struggle. So the point is, let's look at the time that we spend on level 1 and 2, again, below the standard, and think about how can we use these deeper level problem-solving tools to support us getting out of that stage. So we don't function at our best, I would argue, when we're below standard. You work from a standpoint of panic or stress or anxiety and needing to do things in order to get back to where we need to be. So the goal is let's use the tools that are best practice to do that and help us solve those problems. And then likewise with 3 and 4, that's where I would say can be a distinction. This is, again, my opinion on this. You can use the Toyota Kata mechanism, a great framework from Mike Ralter. Thank you again, Mike, for putting that to us. But how do you use that to drive that incremental improvement beyond the standard to say what's possible in a future state here? And how do we begin to coach ourselves to work into that, do experimentation, and have that be part of our lifeblood? So this is just the way I've learned to look at it. By no means perfect, but using the 8-step and the structured problem solving to help us get back to standard and maintain that, put the wedge there, and then using Kata to help drive it above and work towards higher levels of improvement there. Okay, we don't have much time for this, but there are some awesome references here. We'll touch on it briefly. The Toyota business practices. So this was released in 2005 after the Toyota Way 2001. And this is the way that they taught their global workforce how to identify and solve problems. And I'm not going to tell you today that this is the single best in the world and it's perfect. But what I will say, it's powerful. When you are traveling globally and you go into different operating facilities of Toyota, and you can see the boards, and I can immediately go in and start asking the right questions and know that they're at step 3, they're working on setting a target, they've done the mapping of breaking down the problem. I can go help inform that thinking based on what I know. It's awesome. It really is. And it's agnostic to language, agnostic to culture. It's a great framework. So the point with this being, if you've not done deep study on this, I really suggest it. It gets into a detailed view of each of these steps. Step 2, I would say, is the one to spend most of your time on. It's where we all traditionally struggle the most of before we get into a point of saying, let's do root cause and let's go do things about it or contain and countermeasure. Let's first break it down. Let's do the mapping to look at where it's occurring. Let's prioritize. Let's spend time at the workplace or the Gemba and be able to understand that map. And also, it brings in the thinking of a process. Where in the process do we have the point of occurrence that this problem occurred? And that gives us a very specific focal point to look at and then be able to bring into the rest of our problem solving. So step 2 within this, I would highly suggest do some deeper research. If you're struggling with your current problem solving framework, go back to that. And then likewise, step 5 through 8, this is getting into the do, the check, and adjust or act with the PDCA framework. And this is the point of let's begin to clarify what we're doing, both short-term and long-term, see those through. And even more importantly, where I think we all struggle is taking that time afterwards to say, how did it do? What did we learn from the implementation of our actions for that problem to know, did it work? What are we learning from it? Did we succeed or fail? What to do in the future state to either standardize it or go back and tweak that problem solving. So we could do a whole couple of days on this. Many people offer that, and I suggest any reference available to you to learn better problem solving is a good reference. Okay, and what typically comes out of this, again, just maybe some inspiration. When the team gets good at this problem solving and this improvement, it becomes infectious. And it's quite fun if you can support this as a leader and say, let's celebrate those wins. It's not just send me an email when you're done and great and good job. It's how do we have that captured, ideally with a photo just on the wall to say, what was the before, the previous current state? Where are we now as a result of our improvement? Let's show the wins, safety, quality, and delivery productivity. How did the team come to this output? And then be able to just have that be celebrated. So I think that is the goal. Let's have our team members thinking with this improvement mindset, celebrate it. No improvement is too small. So that's what we want to be emphasizing here. Getting into these last couple of pieces, I think as leaders as well, leader standard work is oftentimes, I think, intimidating as a concept, and we might feel it's too rigid and whatever. I'm a leader, I know what to do, I have my job. I do say there are some key pieces, and this is maybe what I've had to learn and help coach other leaders to do. Your weekly plan, being able to spend some time, whether on Friday afternoon is great before the weekend, you have some time to reflect over the weekend, or like a Sunday evening, early Monday, be able to say, what is my week? What are the big things I need to accomplish? What roles do I fill as a leader, whether in my business or otherwise? And then how am I going to do these things very proactively throughout my week and plan them out? Then what is my day in the life? What are the day-to-day checklist activities? It can even take the form ideally of a checklist to say before the shift or in the shift, after the shift, what do I need to be doing to support the development of my team? And ideally supporting the operating results, but also supporting the development of the team to identify and solve problems. Then at the end of the week, I love a long commute sometimes, not every day, but sometimes to be able to think about how did this week go? For myself as a leader, what went well? What could I improve? Man, I snapped a little bit during that problem solving when we had that breakdown on line 2. What could I have done that made me pause and think, hey, how can I guide the team on some problem solving not be inefficient, not belabor it, but how do I at least get that better output for next week? So I think that's the goal, is spend some time as your own leader looking in the mirror and being able to think what really helped my team this week or hurt my team. And then I think every month is an ideal timeline to go back and say, let's look at our strategy, whatever format that takes. How are we doing? How am I doing as a leader working towards that? You can do this more frequently, but I think once a month is at least what you need to be doing in order to understand, are you heading in the right direction with your own leadership, with the results of your team, and otherwise. Okay, the last piece here around developing the team. And this is a tool that we've developed for our portfolio of companies, and it works quite well. This is our training coordination platform, I would say. Each team member has a clear understanding of their role, what is their responsibility, skill, and requirement set. And it can often, it's not in replacement of a job description, but it helps bring that job description to life. And then they have an initial cross-training matrix score along with that, where they are on the training journey. And then we have a prioritized development that goes along with that. Okay, which are the key skills or responsibilities or requirements that we want to be working on in this next quarter? And how can I support you as a leader to do that? And then the goal is we do a one-on-one on a regular basis to be able to say, based on those prioritized areas, how can we be working on that? What's going well? What's not going well? What action items can I be doing as a leader to support you? And the point is that this drives leadership behavior from the team leader. It drives more a long-term planning view from the team members, that they're aware of the work that they're doing day in day and the development that they can be doing to begin to build more flexibility or work into a future role. So it's been quite fun. And again, no perfect system, but it's a system in place that's been useful to help support the development of our teams. Likewise, one final best practice here, the role of TWI. I think we've got great case studies on this available, whether throughout the Global Connection or otherwise, but I suggest doing a deeper dive on this. These are foundational, coming out of the World War II days, and some awesome examples, but I love it because these cards are exactly what they had almost 80 years ago. And the point is they still work very well because they're principle-based, very practical, straightforward. They truly suggest if you're struggling with training, if you're struggling with variability in your operating environment, as I think we all are in some way, at least understand how this could potentially help you in that journey. And my closing point, definition of an excellent system. I would say a good system will have a format of continuous thinking, learning, and improvement. And it'll have some disparate elements of those working, but an excellent system has those and fosters those. It comes back and does the true PDCA from a leadership standpoint to say, is this system effective, that our team members are having good thinking, that we're demonstrating the ability to learn from our day-to-day, week-to-week results, and that we're showing a demonstrated improvement as a result of that thinking. And that helps your team members with their morale, I will say, their productivity, but also obviously it gets your business results that we know we're all working towards. Awesome. And I'm sorry, guys, I know I wanted to have some time for questions, but maybe a quick one here, but thank you for tuning in.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. Just also showing that people development happens within systems, which, typically systems tend to be invisible to us. We only see the artifacts, but I think just, recognizing that is valuable. Maybe one quick question, because I can't see, from our, here we don't have any questions, but maybe where to start, because it feels like it's a lot, but, where would be the most practical place to start?
Yeah, I'm going to take us back here very briefly. This slide here, this can literally be, as I did with PowerPoint, a nice little box and then nice little words, and literally put that on a flip chart, piece of paper, whiteboard, and begin to do that for yourself within whatever area you want to start with. Hey, pick a problem area perhaps where you're struggling, or pick for your own team. Hey, what are the scoreboard elements that we want to put on here? What makes it a good week? How many output units do we need? Whatever, define those and just start that journey. So I think this is the best map I can give you as a starting point. I've been fortunate to do this several times, and it's quite fun because you learn from the way that you do it each time. But this is my best advice.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think then that can be the end, because we don't want to eat into other sessions. But if anybody has a question, please, I still don't see any questions. So thank you everyone for joining us. Yeah, we've got a lot of other, insightful sessions. So please, let's continue supporting the other sessions. Thank you so much again for making the time. And thanks, Ben, for, taking us through this insightful presentation.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.